There is a reason this subject creates so much confusion. People want one perfect sentence, one magic line that keeps everything calm, keeps everything legal, and keeps them safe. So they repeat dramatic advice like it is universal law. Never say, "Yes, I have a gun." But that is not the real lesson. The real lesson is that traffic stops are legally narrow, psychologically tense, and incredibly easy to mishandle with a few unnecessary words. What gets people into trouble is not just dishonesty, it is bad timing, bad framing, and the false belief that roadside encounters work like courtroom arguments. They do not. When those lights hit your mirror, your goal is not to prove a point. It is not to sound clever. It is not to win a constitutional debate on asphalt. Your goal is to stay calm, stay predictable, and avoid giving the situation a life of its own. And the law reflects that reality. In Berkemeier Veers, McCarty, the Supreme Court said, the roadside questioning of a motorist detained pursuant to a routine traffic stop does not constitute custodial interrogation for the purposes of the Miranda rule. In plain English, a normal traffic stop is a detention, but it is not automatically the kind of full custodial setting people imagine from police dramas. That means many people walk into these encounters with the wrong mental script from the very beginning. That is why the first mistake is blurting out information without structure. If your state requires disclosure or the officer directly asks whether you are armed, then yes, you need to answer truthfully and promptly. But dumping out the sentence, "Yes, I have a gun," with no context, no calm, and no instruction request can change the temperature of the stop instantly. It gives away control of your composure before you have even established that your hands are visible, that you are compliant, and that you are not making sudden movements. A safer approach is simple, direct, and controlled. "Officer, I want to comply. I am lawfully carrying. My hands will remain visible. How would you like me to proceed?" That sentence does three things at once. It communicates legality, signals calm, and asks for instructions before movement. That is what matters. And that same rule applies to almost everything else people say on the roadside. The less you improvise, the more protected you usually are. The second mistake is volunteering details you were not asked for. It's in the glove box. It's in the center console. It's under the seat. It's right next to my registration. People say these things because they think they are helping. Sometimes they are actually creating a far more complicated encounter. The moment you introduce exact location details, especially if your documents are near that area, you have turned a basic traffic stop into a weapon management problem. Now the officer is thinking about access, reach, movement, and threat perception all at once. And the bigger legal principle here is important. In Rodriguez versus United States, the Supreme Court's 6-3 majority made clear that a traffic stop is supposed to stay tied to its mission. The court held that the authority for the stop ends when that mission ends, and that a stop cannot be prolonged beyond the time reasonably required to handle the matter that justified it in the first place. That matters because roadside encounters are supposed to remain limited, not expand into fishing expeditions or unnecessary side investigations. So do not help expand the encounter yourself. If your registration or license is near a firearm, say that, calmly, specifically, and then stop talking. My documents are near that area, and I do not want to reach without instructions. That is cleaner than narrating your entire vehicle layout. It protects you, and it gives the officer a chance to control the next step without guessing what you are about to do. The third mistake is trying to use your permit like an argument. "I have a permit, so it's fine." No. A permit is not a speech shield. It is not a shortcut to the officer ending the stop. It is not a signal that the rest of the encounter becomes informal. A permit may establish lawful carry status. It does not erase the officer's authority to conduct the traffic stop, control the scene, or ask lawful questions connected to that stop. So the better response is stripped of attitude and stripped of commentary. "I have my permit and identification, and I will follow your instructions." That is all. The fourth mistake is the oversharing trap. "I was just at the range. I carry everywhere I go. I just left the gun store. I always keep one in the car." People say these things because they want to sound normal, but voluntary information has a way of becoming permanent information. Once it is spoken, it can be remembered, written down, interpreted, and later repeated in a context you never intended. And once firearms enter the picture, officer safety doctrine matters. In Arizona versus Johnson, the Supreme Court said, to justify a pat-down of the driver or a passenger during a traffic stop, the police must harbor reasonable suspicion that the person subjected to the frisk is armed and dangerous. Read that carefully. The rule is not that every traffic stop automatically becomes a weapons frisk, but it absolutely means that when an officer begins evaluating access to a weapon, positioning, tone, and movement, the encounter can change very quickly. That is why loose talk is so dangerous. Not because every extra sentence is illegal, because every extra sentence is a variable. The better approach is controlled restraint. I'd prefer to answer only what is necessary for this stop. I'm cooperating fully. That is not hostility. That is discipline. And then there is the fifth mistake, the one people think sounds informed because they have heard it online. Am I being detained? Am I free to go? Those questions are not inherently wrong. The problem is the tone, the timing, and the energy behind them. Said like a challenge, they can turn a manageable stop into a personal contest. Said repeatedly, they can make you sound combative when what you actually need to be is calm, clear, and forgettable. The better version is measured. Officer, I want to cooperate. When we're finished, am I free to leave? Same legal point. Completely different temperature. That difference matters more than people realize. And now the most important part, because this is where bad internet advice becomes genuinely dangerous. There is no single national script that overrides state law. That means the word never can get people into real trouble. In some states, disclosure is not just wise, it is mandatory. Michigan law, for example, states that a licensed person carrying a concealed pistol who is stopped by a peace officer shall immediately disclose to the peace officer that he or she is carrying a pistol, concealed upon his or her person or in his or her vehicle. That is not a suggestion. That is statutory language. So the correct rule is not, never say you have a gun. The correct rule is this. Know exactly what your state requires before the stop ever happens. If your state requires disclosure, disclose promptly and calmly. If your state does not require disclosure unless asked, do not volunteer more than necessary. If your documents are near the firearm, do not reach until instructed. If you are carrying lawfully, do not use that fact like a debate point. If you know your rights, do not weaponize them with a bad attitude on the side of the road, because the roadside is not where rights get performed. It is where rights get preserved. That is the core principle underneath all 5 mistakes. Do not blurt. Do not narrate. Do not editorialize. Do not overshare. Do not escalate. Stay visible. Stay concise. Stay respectful. Ask before moving. Answer what you must. Save the legal argument for the place designed to handle legal arguments. That is what real discipline looks like. And if you carry, your homework is simple. Check your state legislature's website, check your attorney general's guidance, confirm whether your state imposes a duty to inform, confirm what happens when your firearm is in the vehicle, confirm what changes when you cross state lines. Do that work now, not while red and blue lights are reflecting across your windshield. Because in a traffic stop, the most dangerous mistake is not always what you did. Sometimes it is what you said first.